slowly over the hills of the northwest, casting golden light across the fields. The sound of roosters and the wind through the trees was the only music accompanying the mornings on that farm. And at its center, always in the same spot, was him, the farmer. Tall, broad-shouldered, his skin marked by the sun and the seasons that passed relentlessly. His hands, calloused, were proof of years of hard labor. But his eyes told a different story. They carried a silent weight, an emptiness that could never be filled. It was said in town that he no longer believed in anything beyond the land he plowed, the cattle he fed, and the tools he kept in the barn. He didn't attend parties, didn't accept invitations, and didn't let anyone get close. A closed man. A man alone. But it hadn't always been that way. Years ago, when he was young, he had by his side the woman he loved, a companion with a ready laugh and a vibrant heart. She brought life into that house, the smell of fresh bread in the morning, conversations by the fireplace, the hope of building a family. But fate shows no mercy for dreams. She left too soon, leaving only memories and a silence that stretched like a shadow over his days. On the porch of the house still stood the chair she loved to sit in. He never moved it, never put it away. He just left it there, as if at some point she would return to take her place. And by the bedside, on the nightstand, her photo remained untouched. The years passed, but the grief never left. He had learned to endure, not to overcome, learned to remain silent, not to open up. In the small, nearby town, everyone respected him. Some feared him, but no one dared to ask about his life. He was the man who worked, paid his bills, and returned to the solitude of the farm. It was like that every day, without fail. That particular morning, he rose early, as always, put on his worn hat, saddled his horse, and went to check the fences on the property. The sky was clear, promising another long day of sun. Everything the same, everything predictable. But he didn't know that on that very morning, the dirt road would bring a new presence to town. A small change, almost imperceptible at first, but enough to transform the unchanging rhythm of his life. Destiny was already walking toward him, though he had no idea yet. The town had always been quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else and nothing changed without notice. That was why the arrival of a new teacher was more than just news. It was a ripple that reached every corner of the small community. She came from the city, carrying with her a quiet determination and a gentle curiosity. The kind of woman whose presence could light a room without effort. Her hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, alert and observant, seemed to notice details that most people overlooked. The children were the first to meet her. Their curious eyes widened as she unpacked her bag, revealing a telescope and a set of star charts. She spoke to them of constellations, planets, and the endless wonders above. Her voice was warm and inviting, and for a moment, the night sky itself seemed to lean closer to listen. Tonight, we're going to see beyond the trees, beyond the hills, beyond everything we think we know, she said, her smile contagious. The children giggled, tugging at each other, eager to discover what lay hidden in the heavens. The adults of the town watched with a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Astronomical lessons in a farming town? It seemed unnecessary, even fanciful. But they tolerated it because she had a gentle way of asking, a kind of authority that didn't demand obedience, only attention. And then there was him. The farmer had heard about the new teacher naturally, but he paid little mind to such things. His life had been built around routine, and surprises were not welcome. That is, until he saw her standing in the fading sunlight, adjusting the telescope for a group of wide-eyed children. Something in the way she moved caught his attention, not her beauty, He was a man who had learned to live without noticing such things, but her presence, there was a purpose to it, a calm confidence that seemed almost alien in a town so small and predictable. He found himself lingering at the edge of the clearing, pretending to check the fence line, though his gaze kept returning to her. The sun dipped lower, and the first stars began to appear. He had seen the sky countless times, but never like this. Never as a backdrop for life in motion, never as a stage for curiosity and excitement. She noticed him eventually, standing a few steps away, watching silently. Instead of asking him to leave, she smiled. "Would you like to see?" she asked, gesturing toward the telescope. He hesitated. There was something in his chest, a mix of curiosity and caution that he hadn't felt in years. Finally, with a nod, he stepped forward. And just like that, the first fragile connection was made. Night had fallen over the countryside, and the farm's usual silence was now accompanied by the soft murmur of children gathered around the telescope. The teacher's voice was steady, guiding them through the constellations, pointing out Orion's belt, the Pleiades, and the faint glow of distant planets. The farmer lingered at the edge of the clearing, pretending to inspect a gatepost, but his attention never left the group. He had seen the stars countless nights before, yet tonight, with the children's awe and the teacher's gentle explanations, the sky seemed alive in a way he had long forgotten. "She says the stars are stories," one of the children whispered, nudging a friend. "Stories that never end." The farmer's lips pressed into a thin line. Stories. He hadn't thought of life as a story for a long time, not since she was gone. And yet something stirred within him, quiet and hesitant, a small spark of curiosity he couldn't ignore. After the lesson, most of the children ran off to bed, tired but buzzing with excitement. The teacher began packing her telescope, her movements calm, methodical, yet there was a warmth in the way she spoke to the children, a patience that seemed endless. The farmer stepped closer, his boots crunching softly on the grass. You really believe all that?" he asked, nodding toward the telescope and the charts. She looked up, startled, then smiled. "Believe what?" "That the stars tell stories, that they mean something." She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable and intrigued at the same time. "I don't just believe, I know. Every light out there survived something, traveled something to shine here. Even if we can't understand it all, it's still shining." He frowned, brushing a hand across his jaw. "Shining doesn't fix anything." "No," she admitted softly. "It doesn't fix the past, but it reminds us that the world keeps moving, keeps giving us chances to notice, to try again, to live." The words settled in the stillness around him. For the first time in many years, he felt a crack in his carefully constructed wall of solitude. It was not enough to call it hope, not yet, but it was enough to make him linger, to make him look, really look, at someone other than his own shadows. She noticed his hesitation and extended a hand, inviting him to look through the telescope. "Here, see for yourself. You don't have to understand it all. Just see." He hesitated, then leaned forward. Through the lens, the night sky unfolded in a way that made his chest tighten. He saw the stars as she did, not just distant lights, but something alive, something persistent. And as he looked up again, beyond the telescope, he caught her gaze. She was smiling, warm, patient, and fearless. For the first time in a long time, he felt that something unfamiliar was awakening inside him. Curiosity, perhaps, or maybe the very faintest stirrings of something even more dangerous. Interest, and perhaps the very first spark of trust. The next evening, the sky stretched wide and clear over the fields, dotted with 1,000 glimmering stars. The farmer found himself again at the edge of the clearing, pretending to check the fence line, though his gaze kept returning to the small group of children clustered around the telescope. She noticed him immediately. There was no scolding in her eyes, no expectation, only a quiet invitation. She gestured toward the telescope. "Would you like to see?" she asked. He hesitated, a strange weight settling in his chest. Curiosity battled with caution, and a part of him, the part that had long believed the world offered nothing new, resisted. Yet something in her voice made him step forward, drawn like a moth to a gentle flame. He approached, awkward and stiff, as if he were a stranger in his own town. The children watched silently, sensing the quiet tension. Through the lens, the universe unfolded before him. The stars weren't just distant points of light anymore. They were a map, a story, a reminder of something he had almost forgotten. He traced Orion's belt with his finger, feeling a connection he couldn't name. She stood beside him, patient and unassuming. "See? Even the smallest light can guide us if we notice it." He shifted his weight, unsure how to respond. I don't see how this changes anything." "Maybe it doesn't," she admitted softly, "but sometimes noticing is the first step towards understanding, toward trying again." He looked at her, and for the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something fragile and dangerous. Hope. Not hope that the past would return, but hope that maybe, just maybe, life still had something to offer him. The children giggled, distracted by the constellations, and slowly dispersed, leaving the two of them alone beneath the stars. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of hay and earth. "You don't have to say anything," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Just look. That's enough for tonight." He nodded, reluctant but willing, and as he gazed at the heavens, he realized he was no longer entirely alone. For the first time, the idea of connection, of opening himself to someone, didn't feel impossible. And though he would never admit it aloud, he wanted to see more. Not just the stars, but her, too. Days passed, and the farmer found himself drawn back to the clearing again and again. At first, it was small reasons, carrying extra firewood for the children, checking a fence post nearby, but gradually, his presence became less incidental and more intentional. He would linger, half hidden behind the tall brass, pretending to be busy while listening to the teacher's soft explanations about the constellations. She began to notice him more clearly, though she never confronted him. Instead, she welcomed his quiet participation, allowing him to be there on his own terms. One evening, after the children had gone home, he helped her pack the telescope. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the sound of the night, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of crickets, and the soft hum of the wind over the fields. "You're here a lot," she said finally, not accusing, just observing. "I help where I can," he replied, his voice gruff but not unkind. He avoided looking at her, focusing on the straps of the telescope instead. She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I notice, and I appreciate it. It's nice to have someone who cares about the children and the stars. He glanced at her, startled by the warmth in her voice. The stars don't need caring for. They're out there, always. Maybe, she said softly, but watching them with someone else makes them mean more, even if only a little. For the first time in years, he considered the possibility that someone could see him, not just as a farmer, a quiet man, or a relic of the past, but as a person capable of connection. He didn't speak of it aloud. He wasn't ready, but the seed had been planted. Over the next few nights, their conversations grew longer, though still careful. She spoke of the city, of travel she had taken, of moments of loss and discovery. He listened, sometimes offering small comments, sometimes remaining silent, letting her words fill the space between them. One evening, after the children had gone home, he helped her pack the telescope. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the sound of the night, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of crickets, and the soft hum of the wind over the fields. "You're here a lot," she said finally, not accusing, just observing. "I help where I can," he replied, his voice gruff but not unkind. He avoided looking at her, focusing on the straps of the telescope instead. She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "I notice, and I appreciate it. It's nice to have someone who cares about the children and the stars." He glanced at her, startled by the warmth in her voice. The stars don't need caring for. They're out there, always. "Maybe," she said softly, "but watching them with someone else makes them mean more, even if only a little." For the first time in years, he considered the possibility that someone could see him, not just as a farmer, but as a person capable of connection. He didn't speak of it aloud. He wasn't ready, but the seed had been planted. Over the next few nights, their conversations grew longer, though still careful. She spoke of the city, of travels she had taken, of moments of loss and discovery. He listened, sometimes offering small comments, sometimes remaining silent, letting her words fill the space between them. Under the endless sky, a fragile connection had begun to grow. One small step at a time, under the constellations, he was learning that perhaps life still had room for new stories. The nights grew colder, but the farmers still found reasons to linger near the clearing. He helped with small tasks, watched the children, and sometimes stood beside her in silence, gazing at the stars. Yet, beneath the quiet routine, a storm began to brew in his chest, a conflict he had not felt in many years. Memories of his wife surfaced at the most unexpected moments. A laugh carried on the wind, the shape of the moon, even the smell of hay reminded him of her. He remembered the mornings filled with warmth, her voice calling him to breakfast, the life they had once shared. And with those memories came the sharp ache of absence. He caught himself thinking of the teacher in ways he had not allowed for a long time. He admired her passion, her kindness, the gentle way she spoke to the children. And yet, the thought of opening his heart again terrified him. Love had taken so much from him once. He could not bear the thought of experiencing that kind of loss again. Some nights, he would sit alone on the porch, staring at the fading stars, wondering if he was foolish. He felt a pull towards something new, something alive, and simultaneously a deep, almost instinctual urge to retreat. The past whispered warnings: do not trust, do not hope, do not let anyone in. One evening, she approached him after the children had gone, her presence breaking through his self-imposed barrier. "You seem distant tonight," she said softly, concern in her voice. He turned away, staring at the horizon. I'm fine," he muttered, but even to his own ears it sounded hollow. She did not press further. She only stood nearby, letting him find his own words, respecting the walls he had built. But her silence did not ease the tension inside him. It only made him aware of the chasm he had to cross, between fear and desire, between the past and the possibility of something new. The stars above seemed indifferent, shining in their eternal dance. Yet he envied their constancy. They could shine without hesitation, without fear of loss or pain. He, however, could not. And so the nights became a battlefield between what he wanted and what he was too afraid to claim. Despite the fear, he found himself drawn back again and again. Her presence was like the faintest warmth on a cold morning, unignorable, persistent, and impossible to dismiss. And though he would never admit it, not even to himself, the first fragile stirrings of hope had begun to root in his heart. Beneath the quiet night sky, he faced a truth he could not yet embrace fully. That perhaps, just perhaps, life had room for love once more. The night was unusually still, the kind of quiet that seemed to press against the soul. The farmer stood alone near the clearing, staring at the stars. But the peace of the sky did little to soothe the turmoil inside him. She approached quietly, sensing the tension that had been building for days. "You've been distant," she said softly, not accusing, only stating what was evident. "I can see it in the way you linger and then withdraw. What's going on?" He turned to her, eyes hard and voice tight. "Nothing. I'm fine. Just leave me be." She shook her head, frustration mingling with concern. "Don't lie to me. I know you better than you think. You're pushing me away, but you're here every night. Why?" He clenched his fists, the old familiar anger rising. "Because I can't. I won't. Love? It only brings pain. I lost once, and I can't go through that again." His voice broke, echoing in the emptiness around them. Her gaze softened, but her voice remained steady. "You think avoiding it will protect you, but it only keeps you trapped. The past doesn't have to define your future. You can feel again, even if it scares you." He looked away, the shadows of old memories crowding his mind. Her laughter, her warmth, the life he had lost. "You don't understand. You don't know what it's like to lose someone you can't live without. I can't risk it again. Not you, not anyone." She took a cautious step closer, her hand brushing against the telescope beside them. "I don't want to replace the past. I don't want to erase it. But I won't leave just because you're afraid. Life is moving, with or without your permission. You can either close yourself off forever or let yourself feel." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves. He felt the truth in her words, and it terrified him. He wanted to run, to retreat to the safety of solitude. Yet a part of him, the part that had long been dormant, wanted to stay, wanted to listen, wanted to trust. He started, then stopped, swallowing the words he could not voice. He turned away, retreating into the darkness of the field, leaving her standing under the stars, patient and unwavering. As he walked back to the farmhouse, the weight of his fear pressed down on him, but a small, undeniable spark lingered. He could not admit it, but for the first time in years, he felt that something precious was within reach, something worth facing the past for. Beneath the endless sky, The confrontation had ended without resolution, yet it had planted a seed that in time could grow into trust, connection, and maybe love. A week passed, and the farmer remained restless. He stayed at the edge of the clearing less often, weighed down by the confrontation with the teacher and the fear he could not shake. But fate, it seemed, had its own way of intervening. One evening, a small voice called out to him as he repaired a fence post. "Sir, can you help me with my astronomy homework?" He looked down to see one of the children from the class holding a sheet of star charts with a nervous smile. His chest tightened. He had been avoiding these quiet nights, avoiding the teacher, avoiding the pull he felt. But here, in front of him, was an innocent request that required nothing but attention. "Of course," he said, masking his hesitation with a gruff tone. "Show me what you need." They sat together on the grass, and as he guided the child through the constellations, explaining the patterns as the teacher had shown him, he felt something shift inside. Talking about the stars, sharing the knowledge she had passed on, he understood a truth he hadn't allowed himself to see. Life moves on. Stars keep shining even after darkness, and perhaps so can love. Later, when the child ran off to join the others, he lingered, looking up at the sky. The constellations stretched across the night sky like an intricate tapestry. He remembered her words, "Even the smallest light can guide us if we notice it." For the first time, he didn't see the stars as a reminder of loss. He saw them as an invitation, an encouragement, a promise that light still existed in the world, and maybe in himself, too. He thought of the teacher standing there under the same sky, patient and unwavering. The walls he had built around his heart trembled slightly. Fear still lingered, but hope had arrived quietly, softly, like the first glimmer of dawn. The stars had shown him a simple truth. The past did not have to dictate the future. He could step forward. He could allow himself to feel again. And beneath the endless, watchful sky, the first real stirrings of love began to take root, gentle and fragile, but undeniable. The night was crisp, with a sky so clear that each star seemed to pulse with its own light. The farmer rode slowly along the familiar path to the clearing, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar mix of fear and determination. Tonight, he decided, he could no longer hide behind walls of grief or solitude. She was there, as always, adjusting the telescope and pointing out distant constellations to a handful of lingering children. When she saw him approaching, her eyes softened, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "I didn't expect you tonight," she said, her voice calm, gentle, inviting. He dismounted, tugged off his hat, and ran a hand through his hair. I needed to see you, needed to say something." His voice trembled, betraying the turmoil he had kept buried for so long. She stepped closer, yet remained quiet, letting him gather his courage. The wind whispered through the grass, carrying the faint scent of the earth and the night. "I've been afraid," he admitted, finally, the words tasting foreign on his tongue. "Afraid of losing someone again, afraid of feeling something I can't control. I didn't want to risk it." Her hand reached for his, lightly, tentatively, bridging the gap between them. "You're not risking the past," she said softly. "You're simply allowing yourself to feel again. That's brave, not foolish." He swallowed, his eyes meeting hers. In them he saw patience, understanding, and the faintest spark of hope. For the first time in years, he realized he was ready. Not fully, not perfectly, but enough to let someone in. The space between them seemed to shrink with the stars watching overhead. Slowly, cautiously, he leaned closer. She met him halfway, and under the eternal sky, their lips met in a tender, hesitant kiss. It was simple, yet it carried the weight of years of fear, grief, and longing. When they pulled apart slightly, both smiling, the stars above seemed to glow brighter, reflecting the new light growing between them. "I want to try," he whispered, a small but significant confession. "I know," she replied, resting her hand against his chest. "And I'll be here, every step of the way." For the first time in a long while, the farmer felt the warmth of connection, the thrill of possibility, and the quiet, undeniable joy of opening his heart. Beneath the constellations, two lives began to intertwine, fragile yet resilient, like the light of distant stars finding its way through the darkness. The following weeks were quiet, but alive in a way the farmer had never experienced before. He no longer lingered at the edge of the clearing out of hesitation or fear. Now he arrived with purpose, helping the teachers set up the telescope, guiding the children, and sharing stories of the stars with a newfound warmth. The small town watched with curiosity, noticing the change in the man who had once been untouchable. His laughter, quiet at first, began to return. The once lonely farm echoed with the subtle joy, as if life itself had taken a deep, hopeful breath. He and the teacher spent evenings together beneath the endless sky. Sometimes words were unnecessary. The simple act of sharing the constellations, watching the planets, or pointing out the faint glow of distant stars was enough. Other nights, they spoke of their pasts, their losses, and their dreams, slowly weaving their lives together with patience and care. One evening, as the children ran freely across the field, chasing shadows and giggling, the farmer watched them with a smile. He caught the teacher's gaze, and she returned it, warmth and understanding passing silently between them. And that glance was the promise of new beginnings and the quiet certainty that the past no longer held them captive. He thought of his late wife, of the years of solitude, and he felt no guilt, only gratitude for the journey that had led him here. Life had offered him another chance, not to replace what was lost, but to embrace what still remained. Beneath the stars, he whispered softly, almost to himself, "The sky doesn't bring back what is gone, but it reminds us there is always light to guide the way." She squeezed his hand, smiling, and sometimes the brightest light is the one we choose to let in. Together, they watched the constellations unfold above, knowing that the stories of the stars were endless, just like the possibilities of the heart. And for the first time in years, the farmer felt whole, alive, and ready to write a new story, one not of loss, but of love, hope, and the quiet magic of the night sky. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and follow our upcoming videos to continue exploring new narratives.